Of course, today we're talking about pistol caliber carbine, specifically what I would call speed mount tips. And understand that even though I'm running a carbine today, we're talking about pistol caliber carbine. Of course, we say PCC, but a carbine is a pistol caliber. So those of you that know these guns know that. But the bottom line is we're talking about speed mount tips, how to effectively get the gun in position very, very fast. And even more specifically, I'm going to give you some tips on stock placement and stock length and stock mounting positions and stuff like that. There's some really deep information we can get into, and I think you're going to enjoy that. Of course, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Mike Seeklander. If you're watching me on the YouTube or Facebook Live this morning, Mike Seeklander. If you want to learn more about me, go to my website, shooting-performance.com. That's a shooting-performance.com. You can click on training under there. There's my bio. Conversely, you can also go to MikeSeeklander.com and learn all about me. I'm a professional shooter with Team Wilson Combat as well as a professional instructor. Been doing these live streams. Check this out, by the way. We almost have 50 people on, which is kind of cool. So as we're getting warmed up, I have been doing this for almost 4 years now. So for those of you that started the first DDC, the Daily Dry Fire Challenges back in the day that were 6 days a week, I've been doing this for, I guess, close to 4 years. I tried to count the number of these I've done in terms of live stream, and I think it's probably close to 300 or so live streams. Okay, this video, like all, and I always say this in my intros, is just a small piece of the puzzle, right? This is a tiny piece of the big PCC puzzle. If you want to shoot PCC, there are a lot of things you need to be able to do. We're talking about some specifics that I think are very, very important. But if you want the entire puzzle, please, go to the primary website that I refer to, Shooting-Performance. All of the programs are listed there, or to MikeSeeklander.com. By the way, there are 4 different new PDFs on there. Free reports, little chunks we took out and made into a really cool systematic PDF that are free that you can download. They're kind of cool. I think you'll enjoy those. If you want more information, check those out as well. Follow me on YouTube, and don't forget, I have a podcast. I have a podcast with my buddy Rich Brown, who I'm guessing is going to be on this morning potentially. And we do a podcast called The American Warrior Show. If you don't listen to The American Warrior Show, you're missing out, because last week I actually had Max Leo Grandis on the podcast. And Max is the current 3-time PCC national champion. This guy has won 3 different national championships. And after the first one, I didn't know who he was, but obviously realized he was going to be somebody. And then after the second one, I had talked to him about having him on the show, and then for whatever reason, he got busy, and he got busy. And after his 3rd dominating win, I just said, hey, man, I got to get this kid on the show. And in the show, go to last week's show, AmericanWarriorShow.com. We talk about the specifics of mount position, stock position, cheek weld, and everything else on a PCC. Anyways, without further ado, safety, safety, safety. Number 1, if you're going to be joining this and doing this kind of stuff with me, let's go ahead and double and triple check that we have, in fact, unloaded and clear carbines or rifles. I'm looking down my chamber. I have an unloaded and clear carbine. And in this case, I have an orange kind of a rod. Basically, it's originally made by Rogers, a dummy round tab in my magazine, so I can have that on my gun. So let's talk about PCC specific stuff. First of all, there are in all of my programs, there are dry fire sections in the program. And I'm a big fan of dry fire, as you all know, if you've been watching me. This is obviously called the Daily Dry Fire Challenge in the morning, or the DDC. And the aspect of dry firing guns, 99 times out of 100 will not damage them. But here's a tip for you with your PCC. What I'm finding is, or we found, and this is via one of my shooting buddies, a kid that I sponsored named Ian. Ian maybe is watching this live stream. He found that and this guy is an avid dry fire. He's dry firing his PCC every single night. When he went to a specific dry fire bolt, meaning stop dry firing the same bolt that he used in matches, he stopped breaking firing pins. Now, I don't know if there's a correlation. I have not broken firing pins during dry fire, but I would tell you that if you're going to dry fire with me or dry fire your PCC a bunch, you may consider having a firing pin that you put in for dry fire, or maybe a completely separate dry fire bolt. Matter of fact, if you're shooting PCC, you should probably have a separate bolt anyways, right? So consider having a dry fire bolt that you put in for dry fire. So there's a tip of the day for you. Now, if you missed last week's video, we talked about carbine setup. And this is my AR-9G. The G means that it basically runs off of Glock magazines. But I talked about my setup on my AR9G last week. I've got a long handguard on it, so I can actually get my hand out there farther on the handguard. We're going to talk about that. I've got basically ambi safety set up. I've got a Tecwell Magnavol on the gun itself. In this particular case, I'm running a Holosun 510C. I've been very impressed with the Holosuns. I have one with the green reticle and I have one with the red reticle. This actually has a solar panel that affects and charges to an extent the battery and helps the light run, which is really kind of cool. This one has an ambi charging handle. This is actually the new charging handle made by Wilson Combat. So it's kind of an aggressive charging handle. I'm not sure if you can see the tips and the points. This is the medium size, right? So I found that the medium size is about right for a good pickup and load. In terms of mounting the PCC quickly, let's talk about a few things. Number one, what should your stock length be, right? And this is one of the things that I see in some shooters when they're setting up their rifle. A lot of people tend to set the stock up pretty short, so they can really get compressed up on that stock, and they can bring it close to their chest, and they can, in essence, wrap around the gun itself, right? And that's the first thing I'm going to tell you is a super compressed stock position is probably not where you want to be, right? In terms of this stock position, I can go, a lot of different lengths. I can go fully compressed all the way down, right? Or we can start to lengthen it, a click at a time. And my recommendation is that you shoot with the stock as long as you can and still, basically run the control system on the carbine and get a really good mount. So for example, if the stock feels too long, right? If the stock is too long, when I'm doing my stock on belt mount or any other mount where I have to bring the gun off my shoulder, in essence, I have to drive the gun farther forward to mount it, right? So what I'm experimenting with, I've always ran a rifle or a carbine with a fully extended stock position. My recommendation is that you start maybe 2 or so notches in, and this is going to really depend on your arm length, right? Some of you that are very small, like someone that may be 5'6" or 5'7" or 5'8", you probably have shorter arms, so you're going to benefit more from a slightly compressed stock position. So let me make sure I get this principle across to you. I recommend you run your gun with as long as stock position as possible, yet still be in a position where you can, where you're comfortable in terms of your mount, and you can do it quickly. Because if the stock is too long for your particular arms, then you're not going to be able to mount that up. So my recommendation is to play with this. You start with a compressed position 2 or 3 notches in, and then you start playing with mounting the rifle from the stock on belt position, maybe the stock over shoulder position, and just see what feels different. So that right there is probably too short for me. So if I went another notch out, okay, and I can work on mount position, and you're going to find there's a specific position that eventually allows you to be where you need to be. And I'm going to say for me, it might be compressed 1 notch in, okay? Now, so play around with your stock. And by the way, that should be probably the theme of today, or with any PCC, system, rifle system, handgun system, whatever you're doing. The theme of the day is experiment, experiment, experiment. Constantly play with your gear, your system to see if you can make it better. Okay, so let's say I got my stock position set up. Let's talk about the second specific point that I want to make. The stock placement on your chest, and when I say chest, we're talking upper chest, clavicle, trying to talk this morning, clavicle area is critical. Hear it again. Stock placement on your body for competitive purposes with a carbine is critical. You need to figure out where that is. So let's talk about what that means. So in terms of stock position, tip number 1, the more centered the stock is on my chest, the less my shoulders affect the movement of the rifle. The more out on my body the stock is, the more my my shoulders affect the gun's motion. The more centered it is, my shoulders can still move, but they don't necessarily turn or move the gun as much, if that makes sense. Because You know, think about that. You know, my shoulders are out here. If the stock's out there, every time my body moves at all, that's going to cause a left to right shift in the dot, right? If the stock is more centered, then because it's on the center of my body or more on the center of my body, then it's going to have less movement of the gun itself. And when I talk about centered, I'm not talking about directly centered. Granted, I can't get the stock directly centered. That wouldn't make any sense. I couldn't get my cheek in position. So if this is my sternum right here, I'm basically mounting the carbine just on the outside of my sternum. So if that's my sternum, it's just outside my sternum, and it's up in a position, you know, kind of where, you know, it's on the upper portion of my pec, right? And you know, different people have different parts, but you understand what I'm saying there, right? Now, the toe of the stock is how I indicate or feel if it's in the right spot. So what I do is when I'm mounting, I can feel the toe of the stock touching that spot on my chest. It's like an index point with a handgun. You know that when we draw the handgun and we talk about index points with a pistol grip, it's the same thing with the PCC. And this, you know, position where the stock goes is incredibly important. I mean, I need to be able to feel that stock in the right spot every time. Now, to get the stock there, I'll give you a little speed tip. One of the things I see a lot is people taking that carbine or rifle and mounting it and kind of dragging the stock up their body. And what happens is the stock catches or drags on the t-shirt like that, right? So when you do your full mount, whether it's your stock on your belt, right? Or maybe you were running when you come into position, I want to be driving the carbine away from my body. Notice how the stock is away from my body and up into position. So when I'm doing my stock on belt, I'm going to drive it away from my body and up into position. And I'm normally going to feel the stock hit my cheek and then right back to my body, right? So I'm driving it out and up, out and up. Now, when I'm doing the stock on belt mount, I'm driving the stock or position away from my body and up to my face. That's important that I don't drag up the shirt and get caught here. That's a speed tip, okay? So I want to drive it away from my body, up in a position. And notice when I'm doing this, I mean, it's really a snap into position, right? Now, of course, when I mount the actual long gun itself, with the rifle, I always refer to basically four pieces of the puzzle that I want to remind you of. Drop, drive, pull, press. When I say drop, I like to drop my elbow down. To me, and there's some experimentation there because after actually doing the Max Legrenis interview, I found that he tends to have his elbow up a little farther, which creates a different platform for the rifle or the carbine to mount on. And that may be kind of a pathway where if you're doing more tactical defensive stuff and you're trying to keep the elbow down behind cover versus competitive stuff, that might be one of those few times when there's a little bit difference in technique that we use. So I'm going to experiment with that. Like I said, for you all, experiment, experiment, experiment. Put the time in. You know, leave no stone unturned. Experiment with these things. If not, you're never going to be as good as you want to be. So, but for now, I'm going to leave you with what I believe to be the best, which is basically drop, drive, pull, press. What do I mean by that? That means I'm going to drop the elbow, okay, drive the shoulder forward. And by driving the shoulder forward, I'm going to turn my dot down, actually. By driving the shoulder forward, what I'm doing is, in essence, is I'm taking that shoulder and I'm making sure it's attached to my lower body. By the way, you can't see my feet right now, but my foot position is critically important in most of these cases, right? My foot position, okay, is pretty square. My right foot is slightly back. My toes are pointing toward the target. And that's a little secret I do with students that actually tends to keep your pelvis square. So to the shooting array, my pelvis is square to the shooting array. Remember, if we're talking about your stance, the perfect stance, your perfect stance should be athletic. So what does athletic mean? Athletic means that you are stable and you are mobile. But stable and mobile will be dictated or dependent on what you did to get there and what you're doing after you're done shooting there. So think about athletic in a completely different term than you know, hey, just standing there in a flat stance. We're in a run and gun competition. So if I'm in position and I shoot a couple targets, but I know I need to exit in that direction, my left foot might be slightly to the rear so I can push off my left foot, if that makes sense. And here's the deal with that. The feet will vary based on where my balance needs to be, right? And where I'm going to go next. But even though my feet might vary, where they're not exactly even, one might be slightly forward or one might be slightly back just a little bit, that in itself doesn't necessarily affect my hips. So my hips are still going to be pretty square to the target. And if my hips are square to the target, that means my core and my upper body is square to the target and my chest is pretty square to the target. And if I get my chest pretty square to the target, then I can drop, drive, pull, press on the carbine itself. Okay, so when we're doing this, kind of the speed mount, I'm actually taking it, I'm nice and square with my feet, I'm driving it up, reminder and a tip for you, out away from my body, stock slides up into the position where I start to feel it index on my face, and then I'm going to do a slight compress back with the toe of the rifle or carbine, and then I'm right in position. And if I learn to do this, the dot is right there. Like when you do this, I want you to press the dot in front of your face. So I'm finding out where my dot is. I'm watching how the dot comes into view. Now, you probably can't hear it, but every time I'm doing this, I'm wiping the safety off, right? So if I'm practicing my mount, whether I'm practicing my stock over shoulder, you hear that click? I'm actually practicing the mount. So when I say I'm practicing my obvious, that's like Captain, that was a Captain Obvious statement, right? When I'm mounting the long gun, I'm wiping the safety off, right? So if you're not in the habit of wiping the safety off, practice that. By the way, anytime you grab the gun, you should be thumb up and riding your safety. If your carbine is not set up with an ambi safety, I strongly suggest you set it up with an ambi safety, right? So I can practice actually mounting and wiping the safety off every single time, okay? So when we're doing this, we'll just do a couple of repetitions of drop, drive, pull, press. In this case, I'm starting stock on belt. I think probably muzzle down slightly is the way to do it. And I'm going to keep the muzzle of the gun basically parallel to the ground. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to drive that stock right up to my face, center up, drop, drive, pull, press. Okay? Drop, drive, pull, press. Okay? Like I said, playing with the stock position will make a difference. Where the stock goes on your chest is critically important. So you need to figure that out, okay? Drop, drive, pull, press. Now, one more thing about this position is where does the lead hand go, right? And then we'll do some Q&A, and I don't have much more time this morning, folks. I found that if it's too far out on the gun, a lot of people tend to shoot with that arm way out there, right? Because, that's where the gun is recoiling from. If your lead arm is too far out there, though, I don't think you're going to have the ability to drive the gun as hard, right? Another thing about it is if it's too far out there, for me, it feels like I'm stretched too far out, right? So if I were you, I would play with your lead hand position. This is definitely too close. We wouldn't want to come back. Now we've lost our ability to move the rifle at all. Probably still too compressed. So find where your best lead hand is, okay? Now, another thing about, these positions, to point or not to point or not to point. Well, I don't know if there really is a big difference. I know a lot of the top 3 gunners or shooters, are pointing with that finger. Max and I discussed that in the podcast as well. I don't know if that makes a big difference in terms of the recoil control. I do want to have my thumb wrapped around. I'm grabbing this gun here, like I'm squeezing here. And if I had to give you one of the more critical aspects of the drop, drive, pull, press, it would be the pulling of the stock into my body. So I'm taking both of those hands once I'm out and I'm pulling the gun into my body. So this morning we talked about speed tips, experimentation with your stock length. I want you to experiment with where your lead hand is on the handguard. I talked to you or reminded you of the drop, drive, pull, press. Drop the elbow, drive the shoulder forward, pull the stock into your chest. That's probably the single most important thing you can do. And press your cheek down to the stock itself in the cheek weld position. Drop, drive, pull, press. Drop, drive, pull, press. We also talked about the incredible importance of the stock position in the right spot. Learning to get the toe of the stock in the right spot on your body, as well as how we take that stock itself, push it away from our body to get it away from the shirt and up into position. So it's going away from my body, up into position. If I were dry fire this a lot, I would just simply work on, stock position, stock on belt. So, pointing the gun I think is effective in terms of pointing that lead finger. We can also technically point with that lead thumb, I suppose. I'm not sure what's different. I don't know. I don't know what's better there. I'm going to tell you that the reason I stopped doing this, or I stopped pointing with the lead finger, is because I do a lot of quick bracing with the AR systems, right? So I jam the side of the handguard up against, vehicles or, positions of cover and stuff like that. And if you get in the habit of having that finger out there and you jam that finger up against something like a piece of cover, you'll only do that one time, right? That's a self-correcting problem itself, okay? So folks, if you just joined me now, Mike Seaclander, we're live this morning covering carbine shooting tips, or pistol caliber carbine, which is a competitive division. This is a competitive live stream this morning. Of course, we just finished defensive rifle. Now we're doing pistol caliber carbine. And by the way, pretty soon, it might be next week or the following week, I'm going to be pulling a shotgun out. How about that for those of you shotgunners, okay? So we talked about today, the mount position, all these tips I gave you. How do we work on the speed mount? What should you be looking at in terms of the specifics of the actual position stuff? And I think, to be very honest with you, I think I'm probably going to find a collapsed position. So Jimbo, that one right there for now, right? Now, this is a Hollow Sun 510C. The Hollow Sun also makes the one that is fully enclosed, right? So it has the hood all the way back. It doesn't look as cool as this, which is a downside. You got to have good things that look cool. But the point is, if the entire the sight that has the completely closed hood shades the reticle from any kind of rain and or sunlight or illumination from the above. So I think the dot might be a little cleaner in that one. Although these, I have a 510C in green. I have a 510C in red on my guns. I'm not sure if you can see it or not. You can probably see that dot. Yeah, there's the dot, right? And this is actually, you can adjust the dot. Let me switch this out. I think I can switch this out. Yeah, so this is so I can switch this between the three different reticles very easily. So now, if you notice, I had the dot before. So now I have the little red circle dot, right? See it? Look at that. That's hard to do on live video. So you can adjust this sucker from the dot to the circle to the dot and the circle. So anyway, we talked about some PCC, pistol caliber carbine, speed mount tips, some little things that hopefully will get you to understand how to mount the PCC a little faster. And what I typically work on is I typically work on the three different mount positions. So I'll work on the low ready position, which we start still challenge sometimes, where I'm actually taking the gun, driving it up there, drop, drive, pull, press, drop the elbow, drive, shoulder forward, pull, gun into my body, press my cheek down, okay, drop, drive, pull, press. I do a stock over shoulder mount, drop, drive, pull, press. Then I'm going to work on stock on belt. That was kind of rough. I'm experimenting more with, instead of this to this. I'm not sure which the best way to go is. Probably low. Anyways, that's it, folks. As always, whatever system you're working on, PCC, pistol caliber carbine, AR, rifles, whatever you're trying to get good with, just take some time. So at the end of this live stream, grab your PCC or your rifle and work 100 mounts. Stock over shoulder, stock on belt, muzzle low. Work 100 mounts using those three positions and see what you can figure out. See how you can get the dot in front of your eye earlier. See how the dot comes into the scope. Look for everything. Don't forget the position to control. Drop, drive, pull, press. Nice and square. And last but not least, make sure you're athletic. Make sure that lower body is nice and square and nice and athletic. Because the lower body and its relationship of your hips and your upper body is a large majority of your recoil control. All right? Thanks for joining me this morning. Please do me a favor. Share it with others whenever you're watching this, especially you YouTubers. Shout out to you YouTubers. Put the work in, folks. Have a great day.